All right, so I want to show you how to use the transform tool, which is in the upper bar, it's the arrow. So this arrow highlighted in blue is the transform tool. And the first thing you'll notice happens is that it puts a box, a dotted box with some reference points around what's ever in the layer. And no matter what's in the layer, it puts it in a box that looks like this. Then at the bottom, you also have other things you can manipulate in with the transform tool. You can transform something in a freeform manner, you can transform it in a uniform manner, you can distort it, or you can warp it. And I'm going to show you how all of those work. And every time you hit one of those top 4 buttons, the buttons underneath it will change a little bit. All right? So let's talk about the buttons in the bottom. We're not going to be dealing with the snapping function of transform. That's used principally if you want to create your own brushes. It takes a bit of work to create your own brushes, and I've never found a need to, so if you want to learn how to create your own brushes, there's lots of really good tutorials online. You can certainly click that so that it's off. What we're going to function on are really these first 4, flipping something horizontal, vertical, rotating it, and fitting to canvas, right? So you hit the transform button, and then it will always default to the last way that you transform something. And sometimes I have not been paying attention and I wanted to transform something uniformly, but I was distorting it and it went an odd way. So always be sure you look at the bottom before you start to transform. Freeform is what it sounds like. You can grab any of these blue points and it will transform it, but not necessarily uniformly, right? I'm going to reset it to go back to where I want it. So I hit the reset button to go back to where I want it. So here again, I can use this to transform it. If I don't like it, then hit the reset button and it goes back to where you started. Uniform is what you think it is. When you move any of these little points, it will transform it proportionately. Also, you use this transform to move something around the canvas. So I'm going to click on this, be sure that I've got uniform hit, and then I'm taking my pen and I'm putting it about a ½ inch to the right side, and that's how you move something around a canvas. So if you want to move the figure in the transform box, just pick somewhere on the canvas and move the object. And if you want to transform the object itself, then you click on one of these, either yellow, green, or blue dots. All right? I can also flip it horizontally, and I can flip it vertically, right? And I can rotate it in varying degrees, right? I can also tell it I want it to fit the canvas, and then I can reset it if I'd like, okay? The one very important thing to note about this, for example, let's say I inadvertently drop this off the canvas, and I X out of this. Now when I go back, I have lost the piece at the bottom. So in Procreate, whenever you stick anything over the edge of the canvas and you exit out, it'll assume that what's over the edge you don't want. So if I made a boo-boo, I can click this twice with my fingers and go backwards, and I'll get the figure that I wanted to. I already had the figure I originally had, right? Distorting is probably what it sounds like. You can distort it to whatever shape or size that you want. I'm hitting reset now, right? So this can be really nice if you're trying to put some movement in a fabric. If you've got a piece of, if you have used a clipping mask to put fabric in something and you want to distort the fabric so it looks like it's moving, you can use this distort tool, and you can see it just, I mean, I'm sure there's a very complicated mathematical thing you could figure out on how to make this work, but I'm not that bright, so I'm going to hit reset here. Warp is really nice because this way you can kind of distort it with a little bit more control. So when you put the warp on, you can pull it from any of these lines and you'll see that it warps it in a certain way. Just grab one of the guidelines and you can warp it, right? I'm going to reset it. Then if you hit advanced mesh, you get more points to warp it from. And I use this a whole lot for a lot of things that I'm working on in a composition, right? So again, that's hit warp, get out of the advanced mesh, hit warp, and you'll be able to warp it however you want. And I mean, here's a perfect example. Let's say I wanted that train to be a little bit longer. I could warp it this way and make it a little bit longer, right? Or I could make this skirt stick out in the front here a little bit more like that, right? So that's the warping tool. I think that's really helpful. So just remember, you get a different warp parameters if you hit the warp, and then if you hit advanced mesh, you get more options to play with. If I wanted to pull this back in a bit here, right? So I can get a much different shape there. The thing about this is, if you look really carefully when you warp something, it does change other parts of the design. It doesn't necessarily just change it from the point that you're working on, right? And then remember, you can exit out of that, and as long as you don't close the canvas, you can reverse it and fix it. But if you close the canvas, all of the changes you made with the adjustments bar are going to be permanent, and you will not change them. So the truth is, if I was worried about making a boo-boo, I would first duplicate this layer, save a master layer, and then work on the second layer so I didn't muck anything up. All right? And so that's all we're going to learn about. Oh, the other thing I want to show you too, uniform, right? You can also turn, if I've got it on uniform, I can rotate it this way, right? And I can also change the rotation of the actual box, but I almost never have any reason to do that. What I use mostly here is I will change the rotation in the uniform mode with just moving that green dot around. Okay?